Welcome to a story you wouldn't believe if you didn't read it yourself. A wild, winding tale of control, confrontation, and karmic justice unfolding in a seemingly quiet suburban neighborhood. Imagine a place where homeowners associations rule with an iron fist, where a single individual wields enough power to make the community tiptoe around her whims. At the center of it all stands Diane, a woman some might call a Karen, whose obsession with authority would soon collide with a force she never saw coming. A team of Navy SEALs on leave, just looking to relax. But Diane wasn't about to give up control without a fight. Little did she know, her iron grip on the community pool was about to slip through her fingers in spectacular fashion. If you're new here, don't forget to subscribe and tap the notification bell so you won't miss any more epic tales of everyday justice. And if you find yourself rooting for the underdogs in this story, get a thumbs up. Your support helps bring more inspiring and powerful stories to light. Now let's dive right into it. The first signs of trouble. I first got the sense something was off about Diane when I spotted her storming across the freshly manicured lawns at exactly 6:57 a.m. One Monday morning. She was decked out in a pastel peach jogging suit, sunglasses already perched on the bridge of her nose despite the soft morning light, and her tightly coiled ponytail bobbed in rhythm with her determined march. I was just returning from a sleep-deprived grocery run to Costco, carrying far more bags than I should have, when Diane made a beeline straight toward me. Without even a greeting, she whipped out her phone and began snapping photos of my car, the lawn, the community pool gate just behind me. Her glare was so intense, I half expected the phone to ignite in her hands. I've been living in Silver Pines, a modest yet tightly regulated suburban neighborhood, for about 6 months at that point. It was long enough to understand that the Homeowners Association, or HOA, had a reputation for strict adherence to its guidelines. But I'd yet to fully grasp just how intense it could get. And Diane? Well, Diane had taken it upon herself to enforce every single rule with the precision of a military drill sergeant. "You new folks just think you can waltz in here and break the rules," she muttered, snapping another photo for good measure. Her words were clipped, sharp as broken glass. I could barely understand her over the background hum of passing traffic. I managed a polite nod, deciding not to engage further. But something told me this wasn't going to be the last time our paths crossed. The poolside encounter. Later that day, I decided to head to the community pool to unwind. It was a small but well-maintained area, ringed by neatly trimmed hedges, a few lounge chairs, and a lone palm tree swaying in the breeze. No sooner had I laid out my towel than I heard the unmistakable sound of Diane clearing her throat. I looked up to see her standing at the pool gate, arms crossed, clipboard in hand. Her sunglasses glinted ominously as she peered over the frames. "Good afternoon," I greeted her, forcing my voice to remain steady. She didn't return the sentiment. Instead, she launched into a tirade about unauthorized pool guests, discarded trash, and liability concerns. I blinked in confusion. There wasn't a soul at the pool aside from me, and I hadn't left so much as a napkin on the ground. Diane didn't care. She was on a mission. Pulling pages from her clipboard, she began rattling off HOA regulations like scripture. "No glass containers in the pool area," she barked, pointing to my plastic water bottle. "No more than 2 guests per household," she added, although I was clearly alone. It became painfully clear that facts didn't matter to Diane. Her version of reality was all that counted. Over the next few days, I tried to keep my head down. Terry, my next-door neighbor and a Silver Pines veteran, filled me in over coffee one morning. "They call her the HOA Hawk," he said with a chuckle. "She swoops down the second someone steps out of line." According to Terry, Diane had once fined a sweet elderly couple for leaving their recycling bins out an hour too late. Another time, she'd threatened a family for painting their mailbox the wrong shade of beige. Apparently, Diane believed she was the last line of defense between Silver Pines and total anarchy. I couldn't shake the feeling that it was only a matter of time before she targeted me again. Enter the SEALs. The following Saturday, my cousin Jake came to visit. Jake had recently retired from the Navy SEALs after a decade of service. With him were his 2 close friends, both fellow SEALs, Tom and Luis. They were in town after a cross-country motorcycle trip, eager to relax and taking some downtime. What better place to do that than by the pool? We headed down around 4 in the afternoon, the sun casting golden light across the water. The guys tossed their towels onto chairs and began stretching out, their laughter light and easy. They had that calm, watchful energy that comes from years of high-stakes missions, but were as friendly and polite as you could imagine. I'd almost forgotten about Diane. Almost. Luis was the first to slide into the water, letting out a contented sigh. That's when we heard it, the sharp creak of the pool gate and the telltale clack of sandals on concrete. Diane had arrived. Confrontation at the pool. Diane stormed toward us, clipboard at the ready, her mouth already moving before she even fully stepped onto the deck. "I need to see guest registration immediately," she demanded. Jake, Tom, and Luis exchanged looks, clearly unsure if this was a joke or not. Diane wasn't joking. I stepped forward, trying to diffuse the situation. "These are my guests," I explained calmly. "Residents are allowed up to 4 guests at a time, and we're well within those limits." Diane's lips thinned. "The rule says 2. "No," I replied, pointing to the official HOA guidelines stored on my phone. "It says 4. But Diane wasn't having it. She pivoted to a new complaint, claiming the men hadn't showered before entering the pool, a requirement she had taken upon herself to enforce. Luis, who was meticulous about hygiene, calmly replied that he had rinsed off at the outdoor shower. Diane sneered in response. Then, in a move none of us saw coming, she pulled out her phone and announced she was calling the police. The police arrived. It took less than 10 minutes for 2 squad cars to roll into the parking lot. Lights flashing, no sirens. 2 officers emerged. Officer Harris, tall and broad-shouldered, and Officer Nguyen, shorter but sharp-eyed. Diane pounced on them like a prosecuting attorney, her words flying as she accused Jake, Tom, and Luis of trespassing, violating pool regulations, and potentially being intoxicated. The officers listened patiently. Then they turned to us. Jake stepped forward, calmly explaining they were visiting guests, following the rules, and had no alcohol in sight. Luis opened the cooler to reveal bottled water and sandwiches. Then Jake mentioned they were all retired Navy SEALs. Officer Harris's eyebrows rose slightly. Respect flickered in his eyes. But Diane wasn't done. She waved around a stack of papers, the supposed HOA regulations, claiming the rules backed her up. Officer Nguyen reviewed them briefly. "Ma'am," he said gently but firmly, "these documents clearly state 4 guests are allowed." Diane's face flushed an alarming shade of red. The turning point. Just when we thought things might calm down, Marcus, another neighbor, appeared. He'd been jogging by and stopped to see the commotion. He raised his voice for everyone to hear. "She's been doing this for months," Marcus said, "harassing people for nonsense. She even called the cops on my son for riding his bike too fast." Murmurs spread through the gathered crowd of neighbors. One by one, they nodded in agreement. Officer Harris straightened, then turned back to Diane. "We're closing this out as a non-issue," he said. "Any further false reports could result in penalties." That's when Eddie showed up. The power of exposure. Eddie was a local YouTuber known for covering HOA drama in the area. Someone had tipped him off, and he was there with a camera, filming Diane mid-meltdown. She tried to block the lens with her clipboard, but the damage was done. Eddie captured everything, the accusations, the contradictions, and Officer Harris explaining the actual rules. Within hours, the video was up on his channel. By the next day, it had tens of thousands of views. Diane doubles down. But Diane wasn't ready to give up. 2 days later, Jake called me from the pool entrance. "She chained us shut," he said. Sure enough, Diane had installed a padlock on the gate and posted a laminated sign that read, "Pool closed until further notice." Parents and kids were standing nearby, confused and frustrated. That evening, we called an emergency HOA meeting. Martha Jacobs, the HOA president, arrived within the hour. Martha was all business, and she didn't mince words. "You had no authority to do this," she told Diane flatly. When Diane refused to hand over the key, Martha called a locksmith. 15 minutes later, the chain was off, and the gates swung open. Justice is served. At the emergency HOA board meeting later that week, the neighborhood turned out in force. Testimonies flew. People described months, years, of Diane's intimidation and harassment. The board decision was unanimous. Diane was fined, had her pool privileges suspended, and was warned that further behavior would lead to legal action. Jake, Tom, and Louise stood with me as the verdict was announced. Diane shot me one last venomous glare before leaving the clubhouse. Epilogue, a new chapter. The days that followed were different. Lighter, happier. Kids played at the pool. Families gathered without fear of a clipboard ambush. Eddie's video continued gaining traction. And one day, I received a letter from the Naval Amphibious Base Coronado, thanking our community for standing by their SEALs and recognizing their service. Sometimes, the battles that test our courage aren't fought on distant shores, but in our own backyards. And sometimes, justice looks like an unlocked pool gate and a quiet afternoon in the sun. If you enjoyed this story of standing up to petty tyranny, be sure to like and subscribe. Because even in the most ordinary places, extraordinary things can happen. Until next time, stay strong and stand together.